Wait for Eliott to come back in. We back. We back. Wait for Eliott to come on back. You know, and look, it's 12:12. Today's one of those days it's going to be a test of obedience to spirit. I feel that so strongly. Like, what's your nervous system set up? Like when these adversities and these obstacles get in your way, or they just invite you to expand and invite you to respond a different way. And I think the blessing with this is that what I'll do is I will upload this to my YouTube instead of potentially when we're done. I'm waiting for Eliott to come back in. Because I'm still going to show up and give this message regardless of who taps in right now. Look, this is gonna be so powerful. That's why he keeps freezing. This is gonna be super powerful today because the way that you're freezing, the trickster energies are out today. And who's to say it's the trickster energies? Who's to say it's not the Most High God being like, oh, so you're gonna let a little obstacle get in your way? Because again, right, our topic, worthy doesn't mean perfect. So we don't even got to show up in perfection today. This can be messy. This can be on another page. I can upload this to my YouTube at the end, because guess what? Maybe today's the day we upload all the lives from the past 5 that we've done to YouTube today all together and funnel it to another platform. There's so many ways around this. And look, if at some point this gets in our way too, we can always go to YouTube.
Okay, I'll call you up.
look.
I'll call you up.
We can get on a Zoom and we can record a Zoom and upload it to YouTube. Either way, we gonna talk.
Well, you know, all I want to do is zoom, and the boom, boom.
Hey.
On the YouTube.
Look, my man was not wrong today when I put on this shirt. He's like, you gonna take over Gotham City today with your Joker shirt. And I mean, like, where there's a villain, there's a way.
All right, this is good. I feel like I'm good. The screen's cool. I can see you. Man, this is like the IG live that they don't want you to see. This is like the rated X movie that you couldn't wait to get into when you were 17.
Listen, you know what someone once said to me? They don't want the real savages to be famous.
Yeah.
You know, and no disrespect to people who don't like the word savage, so I'll say savage. They don't want the real savages to be famous because it's a problem. So I know we're going to come with some powerful stuff today. I was really excited about this topic.
Yeah, our notes were super hype. So T and I did a thing yesterday where we just compared notes and kind of were just kicking around concepts, and we were both just like one-upping each other with like, oh shit, yeah. It's great.
I love it. What we'll do is we'll just let people know for the past, I wouldn't say 5 consecutive Fridays, but for 5 Fridays in a row, Eliott and I have done a series of lives called 5 Fridays of Fire, where we've been, you know, going ahead and talking about topics that were divinely guided that the collective can benefit from. And so today is our 5th Friday. We've been doing this. And today is, you know, worthiness isn't perfect. Worthiness doesn't mean perfect. So today I'm going to let you lead.
Yeah, thank you. Great to be here. Thank you to everyone for joining us on our Renegade channel. Off menu. This is like, we're going to give it to you. You know, you guys are the hardcore, the truth seekers. So yeah, you know, when T and I were kind of collaborating on this live, we were both talking about this idea of, you know, you don't need to be perfect to be worthy of trying. And I'll open this up with a quick anecdote. I don't know if you guys can see it, but I got a little bit of a fat lip here. And I got
Jiu-jitsu?
I got a little ding on my nose. So, you know, I've been trying out jiu-jitsu at age 41, never done a martial art in my life. And Tuesday, I got choked out so bad that I couldn't swallow. the next morning. The day after that, I got basically like hip thrown by a 16-year-old that I was just like, rolling with, who like destroyed me. And then yesterday, some dude was showing me a move and came, unintentionally, but like, so it's like I've been getting my ass kicked every single day and just getting really humbled. And it kind of inspired me to speak on this idea of like, you can be worthy of just getting your ass kicked. You can be worthy and be a total amateur. You can be worthy and not know what you're doing. You could be worthy and just be straight up embarrassed. You can be worthy and be hurt. You can be worthy and, really like have your pride shattered in these moments. And that's okay. I think that for a lot of us, we've been conditioned to this idea that we have to be perfect and presentable and commoditized in order to go out in the world and make our steps. And so I thought a good thing would be maybe we could just jam on like, where do we pick up some of that programming that we're not allowed to fail? Like I have failed day after day, and yet I keep walking back into the arena and literally every day something worse and worse and worse has happened. And yet I just thought there was some humor and there was some kind of cosmic joke in like, how do you just keep getting back in the ring and realizing that, you're worthy of getting your ass kicked, and maybe those things aren't either or. Maybe in our world that we're trying to co-create together with this space and just in society is like, how about this and?
The quote that just popped into my head when you were saying that is, there's this quote that's been circulating that says, they're laughing at you because you started over, but I'm smiling at you because you didn't give up. Or you haven't given up.
Yeah.
And, I think personally, like what you were just saying, like was a huge part of my journey. Like, like for a long time, I think I was very much a black sheep and kind of like one of the F-ups, like F-ups in the sense that, I strategically planned for my life to be a certain way, and then spirit threw a curveball. And so when it threw a curveball, I became one of those people who was like, well, let's try this, or let's try that, or let's try this, or let's try that. And I think because I was starting to get a certain age, and, when I think about it, I was only like 24, 25, people were getting frustrated with me. That was like, man, what are you doing with your life? Or like, what are you, this sense of you should have this, or you should have that, or you should be under this structure by this point in your life. And so there was a lot of disdain for not having it together, or not painting the picture that many people thought I should fit into. And so, I was just talking to my partner last night about this. He's 36, I'm 34, and the sense of being a late bloomer. Some of us, our path and our journey and our greatness, first of all, might take more data collection, might take more training to get to a certain destiny or to get to a certain point. And I think for some people that is terrifying because society puts a deadline on our greatness. And if we haven't come to full ripeness or our season by a certain date, we're not worthy of certain things.
Yeah, it's like I got an intuitive message that said the fruit is still ripe. You know what I mean? It's like just because you didn't bloom in your 20s, and let's think about it, right? I mean, when we really kind of just pump the brakes and zoom out here, what kind of industries are ones where people need to blossom in their 20s? It's all the shit that we grew up in, right? A lot of it is the entertainment business and the sporting industry, right? Those are two where if you are going to have it, you're probably going to have it sometime before you're in your 30s, right? And I think a lot of doing this work is intergenerational, right? We're learning from people who are masters that are in their 50s, 60s, 70s, maybe even older, you know? And so I think that what's kind of wanting to come out here, which again, we talked a little bit about last week, is like, you kind of got to know when your time is and when your time isn't, you know? And I think that even the F-ups might just be going through some stuff so they could have amazing stories to tell later on. Like you said, maybe they're collecting experiences and knowledge that they can pass on to other. You know what I mean?
And you know, one of the things that just popped up, well, two things that popped up. The first thing that popped up is, isn't it better to, like you said, try a variety of things to make sure you're not missing something that's in alignment with your destiny than to just fall into a default that is the only thing you've ever experienced. And then secondly, when I think about you have to you have to really get it together by your 20s, early 30s. Like, I think a lot of that is based on the energy that goes behind a little bit of capitalism, where people aren't really worried about your development, your spirit, your true wisdom coming in. They just want you to be functional or productive, to often show for things like, you know, to have the relationship or to have the degree or have the family or have all of these things. And I remember when I was starting to go through the beginning life crisis, I call it. And, you know, as I was getting ready to go to Saturn return and I was having my spiritual awakening, I kept hearing this message, which was like, F the white picket fence. Like, I kept hearing it, like, F the white picket fence, like, F it. And for a long time in my life, I wanted that. Like, I wanted, and it's not to say I still don't want the structure of what a healthy home, healthy relationship, healthy purpose is. But a long time ago, I wasn't considering really the development or the maturity or the happiness or the real health of my spirit, emotional, mental health that really was needed to have the things I wanted at their highest capacity and their highest integrity. And so, you know, going through the path of the path that I walked, you know, I walked into a world from 2012 to 2017 during this beginning life crisis, and was put into this like underworld that is really taboo. And, you know, for those tapping in who don't know, you know, I was a sex worker from 2012 to 2017. And I remember being like, oh man, I'm in this taboo world. And like, I didn't tell a lot of people while I was in it because exactly because of this topic, you know, oh, you aren't a worthy person in society if you do X, Y, and Z. You're not worthy to have respect. You're not worthy to have a legit opinion because only a certain type of person does this. There's so many lists of not worthiness. And so I remember being like terrified, but also deep down knowing that when I left that world, I needed to share it. I was equally terrified as I was like, I know I need to share this because I know that there's people that are going to need help from this.
Yeah. Well, that's, you know, I love what you had to say about just not feeling worthy and not feeling like, you know, you were kind of good enough because of what you were doing and where you were at in your life. And it's a really hard thing when you're dealing with, you know, the kind of internal component of that, like the kind of self-judgment, and then other people's kind of like perceptions of you and their judgments of you, you know, like you're almost kind of struggling within and without at the same time. And I think a lot of that is just the cultivation of character, you know, because without that stuff, let's say you got it, right? Let's say like 22-year-old travel, like you got the bag, you got the man, you're on TV, right? Let's say that you're like a really successful TV person at age 22, you know, without that foundation, without that journey into the underworld, you might have a more limited shelf supply, you know what I mean, in the world for your use, because without that depth, what are people really going to vibe on? You know what I mean? Or like, what's the offering? I think maybe that some of this worthiness is really us collecting value that we want to pass on to others, right? That's part of our reason that we are here, is to be that battery, that like supercharger that can maybe, you know, it's like when your car goes dead, you need to get a boost, you know, but if you never went through that yourself, it can be really hard to hold that space for somebody else, or even just empathize with like the feeling of being a fuck up. You know, like, I think that's such a cool thing that no one really talks about, but like, I've certainly felt that energy. You know, I've been a magazine editor, a TV host, a tie designer. You know, I've had a lot of different jobs. And I remember one day my friend was in a really shitty mood, and he was a mentor, someone I look up to. And he told me that I was a failure, you know, which is like, you don't forget it when someone tells you, even if like you just don't forget it when someone tells you that they're a failure. You know what I mean? That you're a failure. And I just was like, man, maybe I'm not a failure. Maybe it's like, I'm just trying out a bunch of different shit that 10 years down the road is going to give me a lot of different skill sets to be able to communicate with a lot of people. Thank you. That's kind of the nugget of what I was trying to say. That like this fuck up energy that you may identify with might be just deepening your skill sets, might be deepening your ability, like yourself, right? You're someone, you can talk to the people on the light side. You could also talk to people on the dungeon side, right? So a lot of this maybe is, you might see yourself as being unworthy now. You might see yourself as being a fuck up now, but maybe from a different perspective, you're a person in process who's collecting a lot of life experiences. Let me ask you this. Have you ever, did you ever have a period where you went from kind of having a lot of material success to like having it all taken away and then having to kind of like come back up from the bottom?
Absolutely. You know, my spiritual awakening was being, you know, stripped of many things, voluntarily and involuntarily. And when I was going through the hardest part of my awakening, which was in 2016, I kept hearing the Jungle Book, the bare necessities. I kept hearing like spirit, like they're stripping me down to the bare necessities. Like they're stripping you down. They're stripping you down. So, you know, this is something that I posted about this morning on my page. Like, loss, you know, material loss can always happen in life. And there's a lot of conditioning due to capitalism that identifies our worthiness with materialism and capitalism. And so that's why we do have so many adults struggling at times to find happiness or find their soul or find their spirit, because when they lose these things or these things fluctuate, they're measuring their sovereignty and their worth and their foundation on things and not their actual spirit. And I think that's why it's such a wonderful time to be alive with like people such as ourselves that are helping people's inner child and also youth coming up to identify with your currency, your spiritual currency, so that you're not defined by the things that come and go through life.
That's it. The winds of fortune, right? I mean, again, this is like a lot of, I remember I had a friend who's a real successful musician, and I looked up to him, you know, he's like artist, people like his stuff. And he said to me once, he was like, you know, man, I know it's going to happen for you, but you might just need to like really shore up your boat, because when those winds hit, they're going to hit hard, and you better be sure that your vessel can like contain it. Right. And again, we've seen this happen so much in the entertainment industry and these industries where it's very prized to be young, is like, they don't have any equipment or any team, no one who can transfer knowledge to them. And so because of that, they often feel unworthy of their success. They feel unworthy when the record didn't do as good as the last one. You know what I mean? Unworthy when the show is less popular, or you have less money, or you're getting less endorsement deals, whatever it is, you know? And I think, again, a lot of this is like, how can we give in society, how can we give people the opportunity to be imperfect and to be fuck ups? Right? You might just be a fuck up for a couple hours. I know I've been. Maybe a couple hours, maybe a couple of years, maybe a couple decades.
Well, you know what's interesting? This quote just popped into my head.
Yeah.
I think one of the things, like what you were just saying, is that we have to understand that human beings are fickle.
Cool.
One thing that I've learned about becoming a public figure is that, you know, the same people who clap for you will stone you.
Mm-hmm.
The same people who will lift you up will also crucify you.
Mm-hmm.
Because people are fickle. And I really think that's why we have to source our worthiness from spirit and from the obedience of God. Like, the quote that just came to me was, you can't build a kingdom with someone who still craves attention from the village. And I remember this quote came up when I was like, you know, seeking to align with a good partner. But I want to break that down deeper, because I think when we're looking for our sense of worthiness, especially if we're people who are putting ourselves out there, because people are fickle. And if you put your attention on craving your validation, your worthiness from the crowd, you are always going to be a jester. You're always going to be shucking and jiving. You're always going to try and people please and entertain them in order to have that sense of worthiness. And, you know, that is a terrifying thing, to put yourself out there under the scrutiny. Because I could tell you, like, when I really started coming out and hitting the community hard, like, I can't tell you what hasn't been said about me. I even remember going to my first public speaking event with my beautiful friend Hadia, and I'm going to plug her here. Hadia, I love Hadia so much because she was someone I found really early on in my journey through a hashtag, and I really looked up to her as a role model. And eventually, like, I went to like one of her circles, and then slowly but surely, like, she brought me up as a comrade and a colleague and someone that she respected to stand beside her or stand in front of her own crowds together. And so the first really big speaking event I ever did, it was in front of 125 women. And I remember, this is not to be egotistical, but like I had the room going, like the amount of applause, the amount of, like, I was humbled because I'm not gonna lie, like that day, like I had the most. And I remember after the day was done, she pulled me aside and she's like, I want to be fully transparent with you. She was like, you had someone that was in my ear really hard before this event, telling me that you weren't worthy to speak at this event because of your past work before you stepped into this position. They were doing their best and their hardest to make me feel like you weren't worthy to stand in that position. And she's like, I'm just letting you know that because you need to keep that at the back of your head as you go forward. There's people who don't want to see you here, but I believe and I see in you that you are worthy to stand there. And she has continued to lift me up. And, you know, at the end of the day, it's like, you're going to have people that tell you you're not smart enough. You're not, you know, I've had people tell me that I am a terrible writer. I remember releasing one of my first memoirs and someone was like, I think you're a good storyteller, but I think that you're not a good writer and you should get people to write for you. But guess what? Guess who's getting potential book deals brought to them now? Guess who knows that without a doubt in her heart will have a bestseller one day. But again, you can't outsource your worthiness to human beings.
I want to speak on something that really came forth for me when you were sharing your story about how people were saying that because of your sex work, you weren't fit to be on stage. And obviously when we can see it coming from other people, it's obvious. You know what I mean? But I think what came up for me that I just wanted to jam on is like how often we do that to ourselves. You know what I mean? And again, I know everyone has a different relationship with parts of their past, and there's things that they're proud of, ashamed of, etc. But I feel like a lot of us need to get out of that like self-policing of like, oh, I used to do this. I used to behave in these ways. I used to be broke. I used to be desperate. I used to, you know, fall for these dumb narcissists, you know, whatever it is. And to me, like, that's kind of where the worthiness starts is like, can you even just feel worthy to have lived your life this far the way that it shook out, right? View it as a privilege and an opportunity to collect knowledge as opposed to a like tidy performance for other people to like judge and tell you that you're smart and you're the pretty one and you're the one who's going to get it, right? Not that we don't like those things, but you know, it's like you said, as soon as it comes, it can be taken away real fucking quick, dude. Just, you know.
And you know, I think one of the things, you know, like one of the notes that I had from yesterday that we shared was, you know, the inner child often feels it has a lot to prove to everybody, especially the approval from people that we think have authority and proximity to us.
Wow.
You know, we're handing over that sense of authority. Firstly, it's from, you know, our parents, because our parents were our first authority figures in our life for a lot of us, you know. Then, you know, we had teachers. Then, you know, you go to you have work and you have bosses. So there's always a lot of sense of authority outside of us. And then there's our friend circles, and then there's strangers. And we're outsourcing our authority. We're giving away our sovereignty for people. And then we're trying to measure our approval rating, right?
Yep.
And the thing is, this is like, you will always have a false sense of confidence if your approval rating is based on the measurement of the people that you give authority to outside of you.
Ooh.
And one of the things I've recognized is that spirit and God is not that critical. Now, spirit holds us accountable when it's time to change a pattern or cycle, but often spirit is not as judgmental, critical, harsh, and cruel. And can't we say there's anything to be said? You know, although I'm not a Christian, I believe in Christ conscious. I believe in the story of Christ and just how he chose his apostles, his disciples, and anybody who did anything great in that damn book was an F up. They were unfit people, often by society.
Yeah.
My favorite, and one of my favorite stories is Moses. Like, I love the story of Moses. I love Moses' story. Like, they were like, you can't sit with us no more. You can't do this. You can't do that. And God just like was challenging him. Like, bro, I know they told you go sit somewhere else and like, you can't sit, but we're like, you see that burning bush there? I have an assignment for you. You know? And I think that's the thing we have to understand. Sometimes spirit and God is going to put the message, put the ideas, put the calling, put the feeling into us. And we have to really get over that imposter syndrome of like, dog, you really sure you assigned this to me? I mean, because that's literally, I joke and I say this a lot of times. I had Buffy the Vampire Slayer syndrome when I was awakening, because I felt these things so deeply in my DNA that I was being given an assignment, but I was like, God, me?
Yeah, no.
What?
It sucks, dude. I mean, when you're starting out, we talk about this. When you first become a renunciate, you know, and that might be a renunciate from your fame, might be a renunciate that you didn't, you know, it's like you might be giving up things that you didn't choose to give up, but guess what? You're going to have to learn to live without them, right? And, you know, it's very natural when you're used to having authority figures that are not, how should we say, of the highest consciousness. I think it's natural to internalize that as having done something wrong, right? Like, remember when you started your awakening, you're like, fuck, what did I do to deserve this, dude? You know what I mean? It was like, I lost so many friends. I like went from being this super cool downtown music guy in the Wall Street Journal to like, I couldn't get arrested to like write an article for $200. You know what I mean? And it was like, was I still worthy? Yeah, you know, but I didn't feel that way because these people that I looked to like basically justify my existence, like that well fucking dried up, right? Kind of on some Moses shit. So what do you have to do? You got to go find the next place, right? I mean, I'm Jewish. I'm used to this traveling, you know, history, right? If the well dries up, what do? You and your tribe have to go and find the next homeland, the next place where things are fertile, right? The next place where you're welcoming. But yeah, I love this thing that just like spirit, I think, is a lot more kind and laid back than we like to think. We were actually texting about this, is like getting out of that like sort of Judeo-Christian like hardcore punishment mindset that so many of us grew up with, right? Because that's our parents, that's school. Oh, you were a bad boy today, like you were too loud, or you didn't know the answer in this way that is the right one, so you're bad. Like we internalize all that shit. You know, and I think that's where a lot of our unworthiness comes from, is we don't come from environments a lot of the time where we were just encouraged to like fuck around and like see what happens, get loose, you know?
Absolutely. You know, I think because a lot of structures, right? A lot of structures, and I think we're starting to move away from them. Like, I'll give you an example. Like, my partner, like, he wasn't good in school. Like, we talk about this all the time. Like,
Yeah.
he's like, I was so bad in school. It's not because he's not intelligent, but he didn't enjoy being in the classroom, or he didn't like doing homework. But he has this like weird intelligence about him that like, you're just like, bro, you know?
Yeah.
He just messaged me. He said, "Why are you not on live?" Look, he knows I'm talking about it. He's like, "Why aren't you on live? Go to my stories, man. I'm talking about you." But you know, for him, like even the path he's going on, he's an MBA agent and he's working with the youth, you know, he's working with the youth. I'm working with the youth. We've both had paths where people would be like, "Oh, well, you didn't achieve in this way, or you didn't X, Y, and Z in this way. So what do you have to offer to X, Y, and Z, because you don't check off these boxes?" And, you know, I think we see that a lot. Like, I'm quite neurodivergent, that I'm learning. Like, you know, I really have bad ADHD. I have so many things that I'm realizing, like, fuck, like, I have a lot of things that make me unique in my makeup, but even with all these imperfections, or with all of these, I don't want to call them imperfections. I want to call them quirks. Well, all these little quirks, right? Yeah. Sometimes we think like I have too many quirks for me to show up in a way that is purposeful or functional enough. And I feel like that's the word, like enough for whatever God wants to use me. Enough, you know? And I think people become obsessed with perfection over realness. And this is why I tell people, and I am putting this out there, I cannot wait to sit down with her and tell her to her face how much she inspired me. Cardi B was one of my role models on this path to becoming a healer. I remember being a sex worker and waiting for appointments, and I'd be on Instagram watching her just talk. And I'm like, what is it about this woman that's just so real? And I feel it so deeply in my heart. Yeah. I was just so enamored by her realness. And what I loved about her and her story, anybody, look, Cardi B is conscious as hell. She is mindful as hell. She's a master manifester. People can learn some shit from her. She did not give a shit. She got on there with her crooked teeth, with her broken language as a sex worker, and she talked her stuff. And she talked her stuff into a primetime TV deal, and then took that opportunity to rap. And then people still told her, you suck. Your music is going to suck. You're going to... And just seeing the heart and the confidence, like, who would have thought that in 2016, 2017, her as a sex worker, just talking from her Instagram, and then she goes to being on CNN talking with a presidential candidate? It's like, how dare you? Like, how are you worthy to sit down with a future presidential candidate to talk about politics? Because people will still say to her, you're not worthy to do that.
You know, it's funny. It's the quirkless envy the quirky, right? Like, you know, just those people you meet and they make no impression on you whatsoever. You know, I mean, I'm sure they're very important to their families, but like, just in the spirit of this conversation, being a vessel for spirit, right? Which is what our initial idea was, like, how to be worthy of spirit, right? Is you need those quirks. You need those things that make you idiosyncratic and strange and make you stand out, right? Look at Prince, dude. Dude's like 5'3", you know what I mean? Like, this total super neurodivergent. I mean, people say that, like, he was just the weirdest fucking person to ever try and communicate with, had no skill, like, would just call people up at 4 a.m, like, expecting them to pick up the phone, would just, like, walk out of a room without saying anything, wouldn't say hi to people when he walked in, just total fucking freak. And it's like, when you have no swag, it would make sense that you would be very envious of people who do. Right?
I mean, like, one of my favorite movies is Bohemian Rhapsody.
Sure.
Because Freddie Mercury, just like, again, all of these people that we're naming, like, by standards, were like freaks, right?
Total
Freaks,
fuck up.
misfits, not perfect. Like, I love the part in Bohemian Rhapsody where he's like, do you need a singer? And they're like dogging him out for his teeth. And he's like, oh, but I'm going to show you though. And goes on to become this mastermind and genius behind so much of their success.
Yeah.
You know, and I remember one of my favorite quotes from the movies. He's like, we're just a bunch of misfits singing to the other misfits in the back of the room. And, you know, it's just, that's what someone asked me one time. One time I went to the nail salon to get my nails done, and I bumped into this lady from my gym. And we were talking, and she got to asking me about, like, what I do. And I told her, and she was kind of taken back that I was more on the occult side and that I was more on the witch side, as opposed to, because I told her, you know, like, Christ consciousness, God, spirit. So she's like, so why didn't you become a preacher? Or like, why didn't you become a pastor? And I said, because first of all, that's not a place that I've ever felt like I've truly fit in. It's not a place where I found my peace and my divinity. And also, I'm more for the people who don't feel safe in a lot of those spaces.
Yeah. People that don't see themselves represented, right?
Yep.
So worthiness through a certain lens might just need to come from your community, your fellow misfits. Maybe it's like, maybe part of the message, right, is like, stop looking out there trying to get into the pretty people club when your crew might be in like the former fuck up central that then go on to like run the game. You know?
You know, one of the notes I had from yesterday too that I sent you, it said, you know, people try really hard instead of just being, allowing, and surrendering. You know? Oh
yeah.
And that comes from an aspect of people have a hard time just trusting themselves. Like, one of the best things I ever did in my life, because, you know, I used to get dressed every day when I was a worker. I used to do hair and makeup every day, you know, put myself together. And I remember, and although I did that, there's an aspect of me that was like really still scared to be in front of the camera. Like, there's still days that like, I'm like, I have social anxiety about it and being seen. And so I remember hearing like, when you do this, when you go for motivational speaking, this part of this time in your life, like, just like, I just kept hearing, get over yourself. Like, they were like, get over yourself, just get over yourself, just get out of your own way, just get. So I remember when, you know, when I started my really my practice, I would just wake up, roll out of bed, make me a cup of Cafe Bustelo, and go sit on the porch and talk my stuff.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's some days I look back, I'm like, girl, you look crazy.
Yeah.
But I remember one of my missions for this practice was, your people are not going to care how you show up. They just want you to show up.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted people to care more about my presence than my appearance.
Mm-hmm.
Than the cover that they want to judge things by. It was like, even when people ask me my name, sometimes people are like, you know, I know you go by Trap Witch, but like, do you have a name like you prefer to be called? And I'll give them a list of things, but I always say to them, I said, I'm so over a name. I identify as a frequency now. Like, I want to be a vibe and a frequency. I mean, you could call me anything, because I've been called anything and everything under the sun.
Going back,
so I'm not attached to the names as people call me now. I identify with the frequency.
We got to get you a symbol, T.
A sigil? I know, right? I had one when I first came out.
Right? Again, going back to Prince. Prince must be in the air today, right? Because remember, in the mid-'90s, he's like, I'm not Prince. You know what I mean? He got that deep-ass voice. I'm not Prince anymore. I can't even do it. But yeah, I mean, I think, again, you know, this, to me, what's coming up is like, you kind of have to create your own criteria for what makes you worthy or not worthy. And I think that takes a little bit of experience, and you need a little bit of life underneath you before you can do that. Because like I said, you know, like we've been talking about, we're so used to always looking out there. You know, is it the teacher? Is it Instagram? Is it the entertainment industry? Is it my clients? Like, who's choosing me to be the bright, pretty one that's like, you know, the one, like the queen of the scene, you know? And I think instead it's more like, who am I and who's going to love me unconditionally, right? I mean, going back to Christ consciousness, that's what we want, right? We want a safe place where we can be loved with all of our weirdness, all of our quirks, all the ways in which, like, you know, we've maybe fucked up in the past and didn't, you know, weren't the cool kids. I mean, to me, like, this work it reminds me a lot of like when I was in the punk scene, and maybe it's a generalization, but I sort of love the fact that, like, you got to be a little bit off and just interested in some weird shit to want to like pass through these doors. You know what I mean? Because like, it's not easy, especially in the beginning when you're cut off from validation, money, a lot of your friends. You risk being criticized. A lot of us, you know, we diverge from our family's faith. And, you know, I mean, you have to really be a freaker to want to stick with this for like the long haul. And, you know, I think that's kind of dope though, because maybe this next phase, as we get out of like Instagram-y, everybody needs to like it, we're going to fucking censor you if we don't agree with you shit. Maybe what we're talking about here is a little bit of intentional communities, right? Go to those people that do make you feel worthy, right? Stop looking out there.
And it goes back to one of the notes that we made, which was, you know, people get obsessed with what other people are attracted to in them instead of what you're attracted to about yourself in the mirror. Like, you have to have chemistry with yourself. You know?
Yes.
Like, I always tell people, you know, especially when I'm coaching, like, people get obsessed with like creating content that's for people to consume. And at the same time, it's like, what do you like? What are you into? And I always say, like, what are you in joy of? What are you in joy of within yourself? What are you in joy of in regards to life? Like, make your art for you first before it's for anyone else, or you're always going to be creating for the crowd.
Ooh, yeah. I got a really strong hit that came through of like, and it was kind of like came through as a joke, but it's like lower your standards, right? We sort of talked about this in the Fake Ass Healing Live, where it's like people want to present as like so finessed and so like, oh, this is my perfect artistic expression. And like so many of us, I think, are afraid to even start because the bar is like set so fucking high, you know? I just went through this last week where, you know, I put together a little zine just as a challenge to myself of like, can I just fuck around and like go on Pinterest and make something in Canva and then have like the guts to like tell people that I made it? And like, it was kind of a low bar. There wasn't really any words, you know, it was just like, whatever, you know, like 20 pages, like in a little PDF. But I think sometimes those quote unquote lower standards help me workshop this. There's a better, my inner copywriter is like, don't say lower standards. Like, but like, maybe it's like,
you don't have to try so hard.
Or I was just going to say like, maybe make your version of success a little bit more humble and then just try and keep repeating it over and over again.
You know,
this live, I just got to say, this live is killing me. So my screen keeps on shutting off. So with my finger, I'm now pressing my phone so that it doesn't turn off. My hand's all cramping.
Oh gosh. And I'm gonna see if it'll go past the 1 hour mark since I'm on a different page. Yeah. But still, even, you know, I'll let you know if it'll count me down, but hopefully it'll just go on.
Yeah, let the hits keep rolling.
Yeah, but you know, sometimes you don't have to do the most to get started. Dude. You know, like what you just said is like, you don't always have to do the most. Like, I'm gonna be honest, like I'm deep. Someone said to me the other day, you know, there's people who are creeks, there's people who are lakes, and there's people who are oceans. I consider myself an ocean of a bitch. Like, I am an ocean. And sometimes the vastness of I want to share, like, I can share it, but I also can not always have to do the most. And I think sometimes people think they have to do the most to get started. And sometimes the bare minimum just to start is enough, like step by step, little by little. And again, going back to it doesn't need to be perfect.
Yeah, and like your edge is not someone else's edge. I think that this is the thing, is that as you kind of get deeper into knowing yourself, you are going to know what feels risky and what feels like, ooh, I don't know about that. And for me last week, that's like, can I make a magazine in 3 days and like email it to 50 people, some of whom asked for it and some of whom didn't? To me, that felt really edgy because I'm so used to being a paid professional and I make it look beautiful and it's like everything is like chef's kiss, you know. But maybe for you, a way to get out of, or rather a way to get into your worthiness is just like find out what your edge is and be honest with ourselves. That's another thing, is so many of us, I think, really fuck ourselves out of growth because we're too afraid to admit what our real edge is, right?
Yeah.
Like, for example, I know someone named Eliott that used to be like this. Someone would say, I want to make 15 grand a month, right? But like, truthfully, there's a part of you when you're just starting out that you might be afraid to make 3. And so you don't even set that goal for yourself. So you just say, oh, one day it'll be 15, right? But you don't say, I'm going to really feel into this edge of 3,000. 3,000, bum, bum, bum. Anyway, it's a rap song from Dr. Octagon. 3,000, bum, bum, bum. Shout out to Cool Keith. Right? But you feel me? It's like you know, we're so afraid to start because we can't be honest with ourselves about what the edge is. Maybe for the next Trap Witch, I'm just going to get in front of the camera for 10 minutes and just fucking talk I don't even need to film it. I'm just going to sit in front of my phone and pretend that it's on. Right?
You know, I think what you're tapping into that I feel like is really dope is pioneering at times, right?
Oh,
like,
I love it. Big time.
You know, I
Big
remember
time.
when I started really trying to bridge sexuality and spirituality when I first got into this game, and people was big mad and they were not having it. And as an Aquarius who's very progressive and very for, you know, the downfall of being an Aquarius is that sometimes you could be so in the future that people are not going to understand why you're doing something at first. And then 5 years later, everyone's going to be doing it. And you're going to be like, but I said that 5 years ago and I got dragged through the mud for it. But the other day I was seeing this, like, somehow overnight, everyone now is a sexuality, sensuality, and spiritual coach. And now it's so acceptable. I'm like, but why did I get dragged through? Like, even the shadow work. And there's so many things, like, when I started, I'm like, why did I have to get dragged through the mud? And sometimes that's what pioneering, like, pioneering stuff at times and being some of the first to do it, you're going to get criticized and people are going to tell you it's not worthy. That's not this, you know, again, that critique. And with obedience to spirit, you're going to have to, like, spirit's going to be telling you, like, you need to talk about this. This is your assignment. And you're like, but that's like, oh. And, you know, I think about this too, like with evolution and people being allowed to explore their art and their edge and everything. And one of my favorite Leos, like my Leo rising and my Lilith Leo, like absolutely loves him. Although he's problematic and stuff, is Soldier Boy. Like, I love how
Soldier Boy, dude, I mean, reinvented the fucking music industry. Was like the first.
Let's give Soldier Boy his flowers, okay?
I will definitely give Soldier Boy his flowers. I mean,
because you remember when he was like having that beef with Ice-T, and Ice-T was like, Soldier Boy has single-handedly destroyed hip-hop.
Ruined music. Yeah, of course.
And Soldier Boy was, you know, he was like a little disrespectful of his elders. He was like, sir, you are the forefather of my nuts. Shut up.
Yeah, well, that's because people that are so protective of their legacy don't want to see somebody else come up. And so they'd rather fucking fence off that small place and be like, I am a legend in this zone. And like, instead of being like extending their hand, hey, I want to see you win too. Yeah. I mean, Soldier Boy was like, I mean, the shit was genius, dude. Like he would go on LimeWire, label shit like, oh, this is Britney Spears Toxic. And then it was his own music and people would download. I mean, it's like troll genius triggering, like outsider. I mean, you could almost say like fuck up / genius.
And the thing is that, you know, I saw this post the other day that was a question to the collective. It was, who do you think is having a longer reign in rap music, Atlanta or New York? And people are like, man, Atlanta has been killing it for years. And when we think about it, like Soldier Boy's era and that mumble rap, like it's been having a long reign. And I think at times too, like, and again, people can have their own input on what they think is problematic or not worthy. But we talked about this last week, like we need to be able to look at people, even if we don't like them, and still learn something from them. Yes. I think that people like Soldier Boy, I think people like Kim Kardashian, like they are still pioneers and they can still teach you something that you might be lacking in order to get to the next level. And I tell people, like, man, mumble rap, like, although I can't get down with some of it, you still have to admire that a generation said, we're going to pioneer something, and we're going to have confidence in it, and it's going to create a lot of wealth for us. It's going to create a lot of paths for other people. It's going to create generational wealth. Like, even when you look again, like, back to Cardi B, like, her and Offset, like, they represent these sides of music that, like, a lot of people are like, oh, this is trash. But look at the wealth it's creating. Like, I just watched her, Offset, and the baby recording voiceovers for Baby Shark the other day. So now they're putting money in their babies' pockets and opportunities in their baby's pocket before she's like 5 years old. And so no matter if you don't think it's worthy, it's still something that they believe that they were worthy to pursue that has changed their life and potentially allowed them to come into their destiny.
I mean, and Cardi is like the example of like, doesn't have to be perfect. Remember when she would just, she had those Instagrams where she would just fart and be like, oops, I fart, right? You see those? She would just be doing lives on Instagram and fart and be like, oh, I farted. Not even like I'm sorry, but just like I farted. And like it was just,
it's the humanness, right?
Yeah.
I think what we're getting at is the humanness. Like, I remember there was times where like you know, like I would record a YouTube and I'm like, I could edit this, but I could also just like give people what I got, and like the moments where I drop something on the floor, they're just gonna have to wait for me to pick it up because I'm not gonna edit this out.
I mean, yo, that's like, you know, Julia Child, the cooking, cooking, right? Her videos were famous. People loved it because she would drop shit. She would curse sometimes. She'd fucking burn the chicken and overcook the eggs. And people could not get enough of it because the audience was like, well, if Julia Child, who's like on TV cooking, you know, can like burn her toast, then I guess it's okay for me too. Right. And again, I think this is like part of what we're kind of jamming on here today is like, just like maybe be a little bit more chill with your humanity. Right. I think the words you used were like realness, but to me, it's just like, just be a little bit more chill with like your humanity. Like, you're not going to know everything. You're going to fuck up. You're going to make some mistakes. You're going to make some people mad. Like, it's cool.
You know, I think
that you live to fight another day. I'll tell you, man, the shit that I went through at jiu-jitsu this week, I was just happy to be able to walk home and give my wife a kiss and have all my teeth and like not be in a fucking ambulance with like a broken shoulder. And I was just happy to fight another day.
So it is counting us down. So is it possible for us to save this one and come back on to finish up?
Yeah, you know I'm for it. Thanks for
all right, because I'm just like, what? You know what? Y'all not gonna win with me today.
No, yeah, fuck
all right. So we'll come back on.
Come at us, Instagram. We don't care.
All right, I'll be back.
We don't care.